Hello, I'm Cindy Winget, the author of some gothic horror mashups, and welcome to my channel. So I am way overdue for another book haul video. I have a ton of books to share with you. So I have all different genres. We have thrillers and horror and fantasy, science fiction, romance, some contemporary lit, some YA books. So we just have a wide spectrum of things. So buckle in for hopefully not too long of a video. I'm not going to go like super into depth with all of these, so we're not here for an hour, but I'm going to start out with ones that I've already read. So if you regularly watch my videos, you will have already seen these books, so I'm not going to give a synopsis for these ones at all. I'm just going to show you that I have them. Starting off with Sunrise on the Reaping, and then Of Earthly Delights. I actually just finished reading this one, so you'll hear my thoughts on this in my August wrap-up. At the Bottom of the Garden, How to Survive a Horror Story. I actually just read this one as well. This will also be in my August wrap-up. The Butcher's Daughter, We Live Here Now, The Haunting of Room 904, With a Vengeance, the new Riley Sager book, Julie Chan is Dead, The Love Haters, Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, and The Nightbirds by Christopher Golden. I've actually already unhauled this one, not because I didn't like it, but just because I'm never going to reread it, and it's not like a new favorite or anything, so that one is already gone. So I thought we'd start with some middle grade. I'm going to start out with horror. So I went to the dollar store to get some stuff for my kids, and I saw these creeper books. There was like a whole bunch of them. So I just thought they looked fun, and they're only $1, so why not? So we have Mirror Mirror, Dr. Death, Cold Kisser, The Scarecrow, and The Gravedigger. And then I also got some creepover books. I don't know if you've heard of this series or not, but I love these covers. I think they're so cute. So I got number 1 through 6. I actually have the 7th one too, but I bought it separately a long time ago at a library sale. So number 1, we have Truth or Dare. And then You Can't Come In Here. Looks like a vampire one. Ready for a Scare. The Show Must Go On, There's Something Out There, and Best Friends Forever. I always love a good creepy doll. I have my Annabelle earrings in. And then I got the second Are You Afraid of the Dark book. This isn't the original series. This is a new series that's been coming out. So this one's by Daniel Valentine, who is an author that I already love. And again, I love creepy dolls, so I thought this would be a perfect addition. I do have the first one. I can't remember what it's called, something about a grandmother or something. But yeah, this one's called The Tale of the Twisted Toymaker. So pretty excited to read these new nostalgic books. And then I got the Carrie for Curse. And this is by an author whom I have already read from as well, and I've enjoyed several of her other books, so I wanted to get something else from her, and this one looked really good. I can't remember what it's about. Garnet's mother has done her best to keep her daughter far from the magical clan, but when they finally are summoned to a dark and dilapidated estate, they learn a terrifying secret. Looks like there's unexpected illnesses, unexplained disappearances, there's a lot of squabbling between siblings, so you know, I love anything to do with like haunted houses or old family feuds or, you know, dilapidated estates, all that kind of stuff. So I'm pretty excited for this one. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our YA books. So you'll have seen me talk about this in my July wrap up if you watched it, but I read all the cheerleader books by R.L. Stine. So you have The First Evil and The Second Evil, and then The Third Evil I didn't buy because I already owned it, and then The New Evil, which is the 4th one, and then The Evil Lives. And I really enjoyed my time reading these. I thought it was a blast. And then I also got a point horror book called Hide and Seek by Jane McFan. So the first 2 of the regular non-nostalgic YA books, I don't know if they're actually horror, but I don't know like what genre to put them under. So we have Battle Royale. I don't think this is actually horror, but because there is a lot of death and a lot of kids killing other kids, it does seem horrific. So this is like a huge book, by the way. I haven't read this one yet, but I hear amazing things. So despite how long it is, I'm hoping to enjoy this one. I do like Hunger Games, and it is, compared to that, it's probably more like Squid Games, but I'm excited to read this. And then we have Under the Surface, and I think this is more of a thriller, but it takes place in the catacombs under Paris, and so it kind of might have horror-ish elements to it. So I've read another book by the same author, Diana Urban, and I really enjoyed it, so I'm excited to read something else from her. And then we have A Cruel Thirst, which is a vampire book. And basically we have this vampire hunter who falls in love with a vampire. I've read other books that are like witch hunters that fall in love with witches, so it might be fun to do a vampire one. I mean, it seems very Twilight-esque, but I don't know. By the way they're dressed, though, it looks like it might be more historical, which I really enjoy, so I have high hopes for this. And then we have Kill Creatures. This is the new one by Rory Powers, and this is about a group of friends where something bad happened and they all ended up dying except for one. And then the next summer, or maybe a few summers after, one of the kids who was supposed to be dead shows up on shore, and I thought that he or she had drowned. And so the one survivor was really upset because she's the one that killed her friends, and she knows that this person is supposed to be dead. So why are they back? So it sounds really intriguing. I love the cover. Then we have Ruined Road, and this one is kind of a YA version of Needful Things, or like Careful What You Wish For. So we have this boy who is a big black football player, and apparently people are afraid of him and he doesn't like it. And so one day he enters a pawn shop and just kind of inadvertently makes a wish without really knowing it, and wishes that people weren't so afraid of him. But as always happens in these books, the wish goes badly and doesn't turn out the way that he expects. And then we have Boys with Sharp Teeth, and this is about a girl whose cousin or best friend, I can't remember, ends up dead on this exclusive like Ivy League private academy. And so she decides to infiltrate this school, you know, put on a plaid skirt and go see if she can figure out what happened to her cousin or best friend. And then she kind of falls for these two boys. And I kind of hate love triangles, if I'm being honest, but every once in a while, if done well, I don't mind it too much. But I just kind of picked it up on a whim, and I really liked the cover, and I thought, you know, maybe if I was in the mood for a good YA love triangle, then maybe this would be a fun one to pick up. And then we have The Lies of Alma Blackwell, and this is about a girl who inherited her grandmother's mansion, and she comes from a line of witches where they keep vengeful spirits away from this little town where this mansion sits. And so she's taken over that job for her grandmother because her mother abandoned her when she was a kid. And so now it's up to her to keep these vengeful spirits at bay. And then this boy moves into town and wants to get a job at this mansion as a tour guide. And nobody else wants the job, so she reluctantly gives it to him, but she kind of thinks he's having secrets and she doesn't really like him being there, but I'm sure it will end up being the love interest. I love a good haunted house, vengeful spirit book, so I'm excited for this. So that's the end of the YA books. So now we're going to be getting into the adult horror book, starting with The Artist of Blackberry Grange. And this is about a woman who's kind of down on her luck, and her great aunt, who is a renowned artist, has recently been diagnosed with dementia, and so she's looking for a live-in companion to come help her. And so she jumps at the chance to have this job and better herself. But despite her dementia, she still paints, but the portraits that she's painting are very haunting and are apparently of past lovers. And so our main character is trying to decide if these disturbing pictures are real or if it's just caused by the dementia. And then we have The No End House by Jamie Bates. This is a haunted house book, I believe. It just says 9 rooms, 9 tests, 1 chance to survive. No one makes it to the end of the No End House. I think this might also have a social media aspect to it, like it might be part of a YouTube video that's recording these people in this haunted house and as part of like a reality show. So I guess not YouTube, I meant reality show, but I could be wrong on that. And then we have The Last Days of Jack Sparks, and this is about a man named Jack Sparks who is a journalist, and he did an article about the occult, kind of making fun of this exorcism that he saw. But then from his YouTube account, there's like a 40-second clip that seems very, very real, and then Jack himself disappears. And then we have another haunted house book called It Was Her House First by Cherie Priest, or Sherry. I have a friend named Cherie, and that's how she spells her name, but I think it's actually Sherry, so Cherie Priest. And again, I think this is a haunted house book, and we have this young Hollywood starlet that first had the house, and then something happens, and fast forward to the future, our main character buys this house and plans to renovate it, but she doesn't know about its blood-soaked history. And then somebody shows up at her doorstep trying to tell her, that she probably shouldn't be there and that bad things have happened. And then we have Where the Dead Brides Gather, and this is about a girl whose cousin is getting married, but apparently the groom had either an ex-lover or maybe an ex-wife, not really sure, but she had passed away, and so now she's a ghost bride, and she's coming for our main character's cousin. And then we have The Farmhouse, and this is a haunted house book as well, about this woman who lost her mother, and so she wants to try and get away from the grief, and so she goes to this farmhouse that, is of course cheap, and they never ask why it's so cheap, but then she comes to find out that a lot of women have been going missing that have been living in this house, and they also have lost mothers, and so now she's trying to figure out the mystery. And then we have Gothic Town, and this is about a woman who wants to start off in a new town. There's something called like the Julianne Initiative or something like that, where you can buy a cheap mansion in Georgia for like $100 because they're trying to boost the economy. And so she thinks this is a great opportunity to start fresh and start her own restaurant. But there's like town elders, and apparently they start to be a little bit overbearing and stifling, and she's kind of worried that she made a mistake moving here. This is a Southern Gothic tale, so I always like a good Gothic tale. And then we have our winter monster. I'm hoping to read this one in January when it's cold and snowy out. We have this couple that have kind of a strained relationship, but they want to go on this vacation to see if they can repair their marriage. And they get into a car accident, and then apparently they have to deal with this snow monster that's trying to kill them. And then we have Bellevue by Robin Cook, and this is about a man who has just started his first residency at this hospital, but this mysterious illness starts overtaking the patients there, and they start dying of this mysterious illness, and nobody seems to know what it is. And then he keeps having these dreams of this little girl in a blood-soaked nightgown, and then his thoughts kind of turn towards Bellevue, which is the old psychiatric hospital that's only like a few houses away from the modern hospital where he works, and he's starting to believe that all of this mayhem is caused by this old psychiatric hospital. And then I don't exactly know how to say this. I think it's Bochica, but I could be wrong. But this is a Gothic tale about this girl who goes to this old mansion with her family when she's a child, and her mother ends up falling off of a cliff or jumping off a cliff. I'm not really sure if it's suicide or not, but either way, her father, who is very grief-stricken, ends up setting the house on fire, but she's still inside. And so years later, she decides to come back to this childhood home, which has been turned into a luxury hotel, and tries to confront her grief and her childhood trauma. And then we have The Other People. I thought this was a thriller at first, but a lot of reviews say it kind of strays into horror, so that's why it's in the horror category. So this is about a group of 10 people who wake up in a locked house with no memory of how they got there. And the only way to escape is to solve the mystery of a missing woman. But there's a killer on the loose that's picking them off one by one. So this is supposed to be kind of like a Then There Were None type situation. But like I said, a lot of reviews say it kind of strays into horror, so it might be more like a slasher. And then we have Bad Eater. I'm sure you already know what this is about because it's been very popular online. We have this woman whose job it is to clean up crime scenes, and her sister was pushed in front of a train because there was a lot of prejudice against Asian people during the pandemic, and so it was like a hate crime. And then all the bodies that she's recently been cleaning up their crime scenes, she's noticed that a bat has been left at the crime scene, so she's trying to figure out what that's all about. Then we have Polybius. This is set in the 1980s, which is always fun. So our main character works at this arcade where this new game comes in called Polybius, and people are clamoring to play this game. And then violent things start to happen in the town, and she starts to suspect that this game had something to do with it. And then we have The Monstrous Hearts. I picked this up on a whim at Target. I really liked the cover, but this sounds like a gothic tale about this man who inherited his aunt's or his grandmother, I can't quite remember, some woman in his family. He inherited a villa in Milan from her, and he's a struggling author, and he thinks that this might be a good way to get away and find some inspiration for his writing. And along with this mansion, his aunt or grandmother, whoever it was, has a really large butterfly collection. And so they're just everywhere, just like tacked up on the walls. And he thinks that they're really creepy and ominous more than artful, you know? And apparently there's something wrong with the greenhouse and he doesn't like to go in the greenhouse. Sounds intriguing. Then we have House of Beth. And this is like a Jane Eyre, Rebecca type situation where we have this girl who comes back to her hometown after many, many years and reconnects with her best friend, Eli. And after 3 months, so they have like a whirlwind relationship. They end up getting married, and she's trying to live up to his not ex-wife, he's a widower, so his wife has passed away, and she's trying to live up to her memory because she was one of these traditional wives, you know, that cooked and cleaned and all this stuff. And so she's trying to fill her shoes. But yeah, like I said, it's like a gothic tale, so it kind of seems like a Jane Eyre, Rebecca type situation, which is always fun. And then the last two I'm not really gonna say much about because if you've seen my August TBR, I just talked about these books. So we have When the Wolf Comes Home and then Blood on Her Tongue. So I will hopefully be reading these two books in the month of August. So if you want to see my thoughts and what these are about, then go ahead and wait for that video. And then I have like 3 books that take place on reality TV shows. I didn't really realize that at the time, but we have The Crème Brûlée, and this is about people who are on this reality TV show that's like the Great British Baking Show that you can watch on Netflix. It's like that, but then murder happens. So it's a lot like The Golden Spoon, if you've seen that book. Was a little bit disappointed with that one, but I did like it, but I want to try something else that might work a little bit more. And then we have The Perfect Home, and this is a reality TV show about this couple that are kind of like the Gaines family. I can't remember what that show is called. I used to love it. Kind of like that, or like Love It or List It, or those type of shows where they do like home improvements and renovation type shows. And so they're like the perfect couple, just like Brett and Joanna Gaines, but then they're not, you know, so people start figuring out that they might have a nefarious past and they're hiding secrets from the limelight. And then we have 1 and 4 by Lucinda Berry, and this is her latest release about this woman who goes on this reality TV show, and I believe she's a psychologist, and she's helping these child stars who have had some trauma in their past. And then I keep picking up Frida McFadden books. I've only read The Housemaid, and I did enjoy it, but then I just keep buying her books, and then never reading them. So I probably should at some point. I hear a lot of good and a lot of bad when it comes to Frida McFadden. So I have Ward D, and this is about a girl who works in a mental unit of the hospital. But then some of the doctors and patients start vanishing, and so something odd and strange is going on at this hospital. And then we have The Tenant, and this is about a man who is down on his luck. He just lost his job and he can't really make rent, and so he rents out one of his bedrooms to this woman, but as soon as she moves in, bad things start to happen, like mysterious noises in the middle of the night, or he starts to smell decay, and the neighbors start to complain about certain things, and so now he's kind of worried about who he has rented his house out to. And then speaking of The Housemaid, I have The Housemaid by Sarah Denzel. I don't know if this is anything like The Housemaid by Frida McFadden, probably not, but we have this woman who becomes a maid at this house, and upon starting her job, she receives this package in the mail, and it's this diorama of a house, and at the bottom of the staircase is a doll replica of herself that's covered in blood and obviously dead. And so she's thinking that this is probably a threat to her life, and so now she's worried that somebody is trying to harm her. And then we have The Butcher and the Wren. I wanted to buy this when it first came out, but then I didn't hear very good things about it. It kind of had low ratings and not very good reviews. But I was like, you know, I could be that one outlier that really does like this book. And it was there at Target, so I decided to finally pick it up. All I know about it is this is a serial killer book. It takes place in the Louisiana Bayou. That's a great setting. And our main character is a forensic pathologist, and she's trying to discover who this serial killer is. and stop them before they commit any more crimes. And then I have a couple of books by Carol Goodman, starting with The Disinvited Guest. And this is about a woman and her husband who had a terrible time during the pandemic, and another illness shows up a few years later. And so to get away from it and to feel like they could be safe, they invite some friends with them and they go to this private island and decide to just quarantine themselves from the rest of the world, basically. But unbeknownst to them, all the people that they took with them, some are hiding secrets and maybe aren't as good of people as they thought. And then on this private island, it's also used to be used as a quarantine place for people suffering with typhus. I love this last line. It says, "Is the island haunted by the dead, or is someone among the living taking their revenge?" So I always like that when you don't know if it's a haunting or if it's real. I always hope it's a haunting, but because this is a thriller, probably not. And then I picked up her latest release. This just barely came out. This is called Writers and Liars. And this is about a group of people that go to this exclusive writers retreat. And apparently something went down the last time they had this retreat and it wasn't very good. You know, somebody died or disappeared or something. But years later, they're inviting a lot of the same people back to do another writers retreat to, you know, reinvigorate the writing process and get them to realize that, you know, what was in their past doesn't have to shape their future. And so our main character decides to jump at the chance to go to this writer's retreat and be able to hone her skills. Apparently the person who writes the best murder mystery book gets the prize, and they get a lot of money and like literary acclaim. And so that's what they're vying for. But obviously not everything's going to go as planned at this retreat. And then we have The Villa. And this is about a reality TV show. I didn't realize I had so many books about reality TV shows, but apparently I do. So this is about a reality TV show, and our main character is a reporter who is actually there as a contestant, but they're undercover just trying to get the scoop and write their story about this reality TV show that they think is kind of nefarious. And, you know, they want to write a report about how far people will go to receive votes and to win the cash prize. And then I have the latest by John Mars, which is You Killed Me First. And I don't know too much about this. It just says that a woman wakes up and she's apparently tied up and in the middle of a bonfire. And then it goes back in time talking about these three women who are friends, but they've been keeping secrets from each other. So I don't know too much about this, but I just decided to pick it up anyways. And then I have How Can I Help You about this librarian. And one day when she's working at the library, there's some kind of tragic incident that happens in a bathroom with her coworker, and she's trying to figure out what's going on. And then I, not too long ago, read Kill for Me, Kill for You by Stephen Kavanaugh, and I absolutely loved it, so I wanted to pick up something else from him. So I chose 13. So this is about a serial killer who, instead of being on trial, ends up being one of the jury members that's there to convict a man who is innocent, because obviously the guy in the jury is the one that committed the real crimes, which is just utterly fascinating. I'm very excited for this one. And then we have What Have You Done by Sherry Lapina, and this is about a quiet, idyllic town, you know, where nothing bad ever happens, but then one day something bad does happen, and this woman or teenage girl, I'm not really sure, ends up dead in a field. And so they know one of their neighbors that they grew up with, you know, in a place where everybody knows your name, one of them is a murderer, and they're trying to figure out who it is. And then we have Coram House, and this is about an old orphanage that has bad things connected to its history. And there was this little boy who was only 9 years old, and they think he ran away, but some people also suspect he might have been drowned by one of the nuns that ran the orphanage. And apparently other abuses have been happening at this orphanage. So our main character is a journalist, or no, not a journalist, she's a true crime writer. And she is tasked with being a ghostwriter to write this true crime novel about this orphanage. And then we have The Other Mothers. I talked about this in my Mother's Day Rex, but this is about a woman who moves into this new town, and one of the nannies ends up dead, and she is actually a journalist, and she thinks that this might be a good story for her, and so she wants to write about it. And so she kind of tries to get in with the other mothers, so she goes to play groups and stuff and wants to get in good with them, not only to get the scoop about this nanny, but also just because she's also a single mom and she wants to find this group of friends. But as always happens in books like this, these women are catty and keeping secrets and different things, but she thinks they're so sophisticated and wants to be their friend. And then we have Someone Knows, and this is about a professor who is a professor of writing, and so one of her students ends up writing this story, and everything that the student writes about is her story that really happened to her in her past, and so now she's freaked out that somebody knows about her secret. And then we have The Man Made of Smoke. I just spoke about this in my Father's Day Rex. And this is about a man who made a living profiling criminals, but his father was actually also a victim of a serial killer, and so now he's trying to track down the killer. And then we have The Ghost Rider by Julia Clark. I'm very excited for this one. So this is about a man who back in the 70s something bad happened to them and his brother and sister end up murdered, and everybody thinks that he did it. And later on in life he becomes this prolific horror writer, and people are like, oh, see, I told you, he writes horror, you know, he's no good, you know, he killed his siblings. And his daughter, she is also a writer, and after her dad passes away, she is given the chance to ghostwrite his last novel. And so when she starts looking at his manuscript and looking at his notes, she realizes this isn't a horror novel, this is more of a memoir talking about what happened all those years ago with his siblings back in like 1974. And then we have The Woman in Suite 11. So this is a sequel to The Woman in Cabin 10. So I have not read The Woman in Cabin 10 yet, and I was afraid to read the synopsis for this in case it gives anything away. So just know that it is a sequel and it follows the same woman. I think it's a different story though. I think it's just following the same main character. But again, just in case, I don't want any spoilers, so I'm not going to give you a synopsis for this one. And then we have Not Quite Dead Yet by Holly Jackson. And this is about a girl who on Halloween night was attacked and she suffered a head injury, and she is given 1 week to live from the doctors, and so she decides that with her 1 week of life she has left, she's going to track down her killer. And who can say that they solved their own murder? And then we have Too Old for This. I just picked this out in my Aardvark book box subscription, and this is about an old woman who was a notorious serial killer, but then she got old and she decided to retire, and now she just plays bingo at the local church and all that. But then a journalist ends up on her doorstep asking questions about those murders all those years ago. So now she's thinking she needs to come out of retirement again. So I bought one manga called Boy's Abyss. I don't really know much about this. I just saw a YouTuber talking about it and it looked good, so I bought it. But this is about a boy who wants to get away from his hometown, and there was like a iconic pop star that moves to this town and becomes like a clerk at a store or something weird like that. And so he is like starstruck by her, but then she like wants to create a suicide pact with him or something like that. So should be interesting. And then I also got 3 different like Disney retellings or spin-offs or whatever you want to call it. So we have Hello Cruel World, and judging by the synopsis, this sounds a lot like the movie that came out called Cruella, which I absolutely love. So I'm excited to read this one if it is similar to that. And then we have Wendy's Ever After. This is obviously a Peter Pan retelling. So again, I don't really know too much about this. It just came out, but all I really know is it's Peter Pan and it looked interesting. I think I read the synopsis at the time, but I just don't remember. And then we have Wings of Starlight, and this is Tinkerbell. And I love the cover. It's so pretty. And then you have this awesome Male Fairy on the back. And then I have some contemporary lit type books. The first one, I don't think I'm going to tell you what it's about because you probably already know. And that's The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I was going to skip this, it just didn't seem like my thing, but when I read Big, Great, Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, and a lot of people compared it to this book, and so it made me want to read this book. So I'm finally getting to it. It's got this awesome sprayed edges with these rings. I thought that was really pretty. And then I have The Manor of Dreams, and this is about a Chinese actress who's like the first actress to win an Oscar, and then she dies. She has like 3 daughters, and these daughters believe that they would inherit her estate or her mansion, but it turns out it's more complicated than that. And you know, as these types of inheritance type books go, things get messy, secrets come out of the closet. So I think it sounds good, and again, the cover is very pretty. And then Lessons in Chemistry, you probably already know what this is about as well, but you have this woman who is a single mother, and she begins doing this cooking show, but she makes it very scientific. So when she's mixing ingredients, it's not like a little bit of cinnamon and a dash of salt or whatever. It's sodium mixed with caloric acid or whatever, you know? And it's set during the 60s, and so it's kind of supposed to subvert what women were expected to do at the time. So she's kicking butt and taking names, basically, but so it's kind of like a feminist type book. I hear really good things about it, so I'm excited to read it. And then we have Seduction Theory. I'm not really sure why I picked this one up. I don't know if it's going to be my thing, because it sounds like a type of book that could have like sexual scenes in it, which I just don't really love. But I just decided to pick it up anyways because it sounded somewhat interesting. So we have this woman who supposedly has this perfect marriage on the outside, but he ends up cheating on her. And she's a writing professor, and one of her students does a thesis, and it's her story of her marriage. And so she's pretty pissed off about it, as you can imagine. I hate the feel of this cover though. It's like rough and like you can feel the paint. Like, ugh, I don't like it. I hate the feel of this book. And then we have The Hounding, and this one sounds very intriguing. I'm just gonna go ahead and read the first paragraph of the synopsis because it pretty much tells you all you need to know. It says, the Crucible meets the Virgin Suicides in this haunting debut about 5 sisters in a small village in 18th century England whose neighbors are convinced that they're turning into dogs. So that just seems crazy and wacky, but perhaps in the best way possible. So, and it's so super short, so I figured I'd give it a go. And then I have some science fiction books. The first one is The Madness Season, and this one is a little bit strange because it has vampires, but it's not really about vampires. I think what it is because vampires are immortal and live forever, he's kind of just like the catalyst to have a human, or human, that could be around for long enough to see a millennia of changes on Earth. And so it's more to do with like Earth and aliens and time, but you have this vampire that lives forever, so he can give like a broad view on the subject matter. But outside of that, I don't really know what this is about, but I hear good things. And then I picked up The Fourth Consort. Basically, I picked this up because I read Mickey 7 and really, really liked it. And so I just wanted to read something else by the author. So I don't really know too much about this other than there's some kind of human alien unification program or something called Unity, but they're not really what they pretend to be. And then there's something else called the Assembly, which actually is trying to create peace between all these species, but they kind of collide and they don't get along. So it's really all I know about it. Then we have In Our Stars by Jack Campbell. And this is about a girl who is genetically engineered with alien DNA. So she's half human, half alien. And she's the sole survivor of Earth, which gets annihilated. But the thing that annihilates Earth somehow warps space and time. And so she gets thrown into 40 years in the past, where she's picked up by this other guy who rescues her. And together they try and prevent the annihilation of Earth from happening in the first place. And then I have some fantasy books, starting with 13th Child. So I picked this up because it's by Patricia Reed, and there's a series of books that she wrote, starting with Dealing with Dragons, and I absolutely adore that series. I think it's the Enchanted Forest series, and I've read it several times throughout my life. I absolutely adore it, and so I wanted to try something else by this author. And I think this is kind of like a steampunky western type fantasy. It has dragons, but they're not like normal dragons. They're like mechanical dragons. But then they still have, magic and fantasy elements and all of that. And so all I know is our main character is a 13th child, which apparently means she brings bad luck to everyone around her. But then her brother is the 7th son of the 7th son, and so he brings good luck and fortune, and so together they go on some kind of quest or something, I don't know. And then you probably already know what this is about because it's wildly popular right now, which is the reason why I picked it up, even though fantasy is really not my number one genre. I really don't read fantasy all that much anymore, but I was getting FOMO, so I picked it up, even though I think it does have spicy scenes in it. And again, I don't love that, but maybe I can skip it. I don't know. So I am talking about Quicksilver. So I don't know that much about it other than we have this girl who has like a secret power that you're not supposed to have. And I think she just lives in like the normal human realm, but then she somehow gets sucked into the world of Fae. I don't know how, but then she comes into contact with this secret world, and apparently there's conflict going on, and she's right in the middle of it and trying not to get killed, basically. And then I have One Dark Window. I picked this up because people said it was like a gothic fantasy. And if I'm going to get back into fantasy, that's kind of the gateway that would hook me, is if it's more like Aaron Craig type fantasy, where it's a little bit gothic, a little bit darker. So that's what I'm hoping to get from this. And I believe our main character has some type of monster living in her head, and then she meets death, and she meets a highwayman that she falls in love with, which was also a hook for me because I love a good dangerous guy, you know. I like it when he's dangerous and like bad, but he's not actually bad. He is good, but you know, he's kind of got that little bit of an edge, and so highwayman would be perfect. So I don't know that much about this other than that it was just enough to pique my interest, so I'm gonna give it a go. And then from the same author, I decided to pick up The Night and the Moth, so that if I liked that one, I had something else of hers I could try out. And there's like this girl who grew up cloistered inside a nunnery or something, or a cathedral, and she is a diviner, and so she can predict the future, and so people come from far and wide to talk to her. But then her sister diviners that are with her start to vanish, and so this knight shows up at the cathedral, and she reluctantly asks for his help, even though she feels like he's heretical and rude and all this stuff. So sounds like a fun time. And then I just picked up Hemlock and Silver from my Book of the Month Club box. This is the newest from T. Kingfisher. This sounds like a Snow White retelling. So we have this woman who is a healer, and she deals with herbs and different things. And it sounds like she might be able to ingest poison and then divine how to combat the poison with a serum or whatever. And so she is tasked with helping the king's daughter named Snow, who has some kind of ailment that nobody knows how to cure. So they're hoping that she can, but then it sounds like she gets stuck in the secret world inside a magic mirror. I've read some horror from T. Kingfisher. I haven't read any of her fantasy before, so I'm intrigued by this one. So we're going to move on to the romance now. I have some historical romances, starting with The Orchids of Ashthorne Hall. So this one is kind of a gothic romance. So you have this old manor with ghosts and hauntings, and she falls in love with, you know, the lord of the manor or whatever. And then I have a couple of historical romances. The first one is When the Day Comes, and there's 4 in this series, and it seems like you have 2 different timelines and somehow they converge. So this one takes place in both 1774 colonial Williamsburg during the Revolution, and also in 1914 Gilded Age of New York City with Prohibition and all that. And then instead of getting the whole series, I could only afford 2 books that day, and so I decided to get the 4th one because it sounded the most interesting. So then we have Across the Ages. And this is 1727, and it has to do with pirates, and then also 1927. Oh no, this is the Prohibition one. So what's this one then? Either way, so this is the one with Prohibition. But yeah, she just likes to take 2 different timelines and smash them together. I haven't read them before. They just seemed interesting. If I like them, I'll pick up number 2 and 3. And then I have a Victorian era romance called So True a Love. And this is about a woman who is a renowned private investigator, and she's trying to investigate a robbery. But then this man, he's also investigating the case, and so they keep bumping into each other and they keep crossing paths, and then she finds out that he's on the same case that she's trying to investigate, so they kind of get into cahoots together and try to lock down who these robbers are together, and then they fall in love while they do so. So that's all the historical romances. Now we're going to move on to contemporary romance, starting with Change of Heart. And this is about a woman who gets transported to a Hallmark type town, and she hates it. But then she ends up having, you know, a Hallmark romance with this guy, and she begrudgingly starts to love this little town that she's been transported to. And then I picked up Problematic Summer Romance by Allie Hazelwood. This is her newest release. And the only thing I know about this is there's like 20-year age gap between the two. And so they don't think it will ever work out between them because the age gap is just too big. Hence the problematic part, but it's a summer romance and they want to be together. And then I have Writing Mr. Wrong. So last year I picked up Finding Mr. Right by Kelly Armstrong, and so this is the next one. So we have this writer who is trying to come up with this sexy character to write in her new romance novel that she's tried to write. And so she thinks about her crush, who is a hockey player, and then on national television it comes out that she wrote this character based on him. So now she's obviously mortified. And then we have fan service, and this is about a girl who is very popular online for her like supernatural podcast or something like that. And she used to like this guy. He was like a hero to her, and she thought he was really awesome and cool. But then it's kind of one of those don't meet your hero type situations where she finally meets him and she's just like, ugh. But then it turns out that he is turning into a real life werewolf. And so she wants to, showcase him on her podcast or something, and is trying to help him, and then sparks fly and they start falling in love. Oh, I guess I do have another fairy tale retelling. I should have had that in the other pile, but oh well. That's Once Upon a Rose. So this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And the back just says, a cursed lord, a feisty librarian, and their baby dragon. So sounds fun, sounds cute. I love this cover. I must begin because I also have another Victorian historical romance called Discovering Dahlia. And this is part of a series. This is the last one in the series. That's this Blue Orchid Society, where basically there was 5 women that met at a party, and they each had different interests and they wanted to help each other fulfill these dreams of theirs. So you had one that wanted to be a teacher, and one that wanted to help orphans or something, and then you had one that wants to be an inventor, and then one that wanted to be a private investigator. And I'm not sure what her thing is. It says she's been working on a luxury ocean liner that's going to revolutionize travel. Hopefully it's nothing to do with the Titanic, but anyways, so yeah, they each have like these dreams that they want to fulfill, and they form these friendships with each other and formed this Blue Orchid Society that helps other women fulfill their dreams. They're really, really short, and they're really, really fun. And then I have Hello Stranger by Catherine Center. I don't know anything about this other than our main character has that disability where she has like face blindness, where you can't really see faces. And I hear this gets pretty heavy in some parts, but I've read a couple of Catherine Center books now and I've loved all of them. And so I wasn't originally going to pick this one up because it just didn't really seem like my type of book. But after liking the other ones so much, I decided to go ahead and pick this one up. And then before I let you go, I hear everybody talking about this book and everybody says it's amazing. This is a second chance romance where this girl divorces this man, but then years later they kind of reconnect and they have to heal old wounds. And it's probably a little bit of a heavier read, but I hear it's really, really good. And then Any Trope But You. And I'm planning on reading this one in January. I was going to read it earlier, but then I realized it's all snowy because it takes place in Canada. So I'm like, nah, I'm going to save this for the winter time. We have this girl who is a writer, and she goes to this little Canadian place and falls in love with like this lumberjack man or something. So it seems like it's going to be cute. And that's all the books I have for you. I'm sorry that this video is probably super, super long, so I hope you made it to the end. If you did make it to the end, if you want to leave me an emoji to let me know, maybe like a book emoji or something like that, or at least give it a like. Subscribe to my channel if you feel so inclined. I post every Friday, and I hope to see you in the next one. See ya.